Yeah.
Ma'am, I think it was about superstition.
Okay, it was regarding superstition only. Okay, I got a question from Pooja that the kind of practice which we usually carry out, and these are also mundane practice, and at the same time, these are based on societal prejudices, and some are based, some have become norm. These prejudices have been carried out in the society. These practices have been carried out in the society, and that has become a norm. And whether these practices are superstition or not. So when you are talking about this practices, definitely these are superstition only, superstitious practices. That's because there is no uh, science involved in it, and this is against the law of nature. But you see, society has always tried to find a reason in order to satisfy their, like you know, urge, and to get a satisfaction out of these practices. When they said that science cannot help them out to solve their problem, so they tend to rely on these very practices. And also it will, they said, according to even those gurus or even the elders of the society, they said that if you carry out these practices to certain extent, social order will be maintained. But to what extent and how far you could actually follow, that is also a question, because this is a very tricky issue nowadays. So all these practices which we carry out, whether it is a religious practices or superstition, uh, and this kind of practices, what I have said, that throwing copper in a holy river will also bring luck. This is a kind of belief. And also you have a kind of, you usually get to know from the elders that wearing copper is good for health. And also not to keep the clothes of mother and newborn outside, because that might also bring bad luck, or it will bring harmful to family members, and especially mother and baby. So some reason and logic are supposed to are being given to this kind of practices. Like you say that people usually said that you are not supposed to, keep your clothes outside when you are a, new mother and you have a newborn baby. And reason is that it in order to protect it from different kind of insects, so you could do that. So to certain extent logic is applicable to these very practices also, although it is not grounded on any kind of science, not grounded of any kind of law of nature. And you see, these practices are universal. So religion is also universal, and this is not something very limited to one particular community. So that belief of a superior order, which is beyond our earthly existence, or having an ethical code of life, ethical conduct of life. These practices, I will say, to a certain extent, essential to bind the society, and hence rights has been enshrined in the constitution that all the religions are to be given equal footing in terms of practice their rites, rituals, their festivals, okay, religious festival, and also carrying out these religious ceremonies. But there is a condition, that is reasonable restriction. Reasonable restriction condition has been put forward, that right to religion should be limited and restricted by morality, health, and you see public order. So when you are talking about morality and health, so you have certain issues which we often come across. So you use a voice amplifier and also you chanting mantra and use a loudspeaker and while you celebrating any kind of religious ceremony might also create a noise pollution and harm the freedom of another person, freedom of your neighbor. Okay, so based on that morality issues, public morality issues, so some self-regulation need to be exercised in a right to religion. And also, as I have already mentioned about faith healing, so faith healing practice is not stopped, but we have right to cure, but not on the basis of any kind of religious faith healing. That is not our fundamental right. But if you see that there are some miracles happen, some magic has happened. So there is also a law. Law is not against the magic and miracle. Law is actually against uh, the fraudulent activities or against the fraud who claims to be miracle maker or that magic maker. So we also have that law which will prevent this kind of superstitious activities in the society. We have a law like drug and magic advertisement prevention act. So that act has also prevented all kinds of like fraudulent activities which are carried out in the society in the name of religion. Okay, and at the same time, you also see that that Assam government has passed this bill uh, that witch hunting bill and that prevention and protection of women. And that has made witch hunting a crime. And there are numerous cases reported by National Criminal Record Bureau. There are numerous incidents of crime has been reported in the name of witch hunting. So making and that kind of superstition usually target women, target children. So legislation has passed and it has prevent this kind of crime which is practiced against the women and against the children and making them witch and also there are practices like exorcism that has also been banned. So different state government has passed different laws, and these laws and legislation have also proposes level of you see punishment which are supposed to be meted out by the uh, people and community who exercise this kind of practices and also this kind of legislation uh, has ensured proposes a separate code for investigating the cases of witch hunting. So that is also, you see, one positive factor in terms of passing of these very laws. Even we have separate code for investigating the crime of SC and ST. Separate code has been established. And you see here, you see when you are talking about the minority, here also we are talking about minority rights. Religion, why I'm discussing about religion, basically it is looked at from minority rights. And Article 29 and 30 of Indian Constitution has already provided certain minority rights. We have that right to preserve the language and culture and tradition of linguistic minorities and right to establish educational institution by religious minorities. At the same time, right to even proselytize and also conversion is also given. But it is also reasonably restricted and that fraud induce cannot be made in converting people of one faith to another faith. So that is that much is important to know when we discuss about our right to religion. And then right regarding the SC community, and you see minority right is very important. And religious community is also one kind of minority. When we are talking about right to minority, we can also look at it from minority right. And another kind of minority rights that has got reflected in terms of right of indigenous communities that we have discussed in one class, and right of SC community. And in the last class, we have already discussed that certain provisions government have taken in order to make that community, scheduled caste community, to like, enjoy certain rights. And we see that regarding this enjoyment of the rights, and there is also a shift or change in the concept of caste. The way we looked at caste, like today is completely different, because we have seen it, and we are made to look at it from a political angle, because caste group are very much assertive of their rights nowadays. So there was a time, and the scheduled caste communities are discriminated institutionally. So there is an institutional discrimination uh, which they used to face. Okay, and they are deprived of their basic necessities and basic rights. But with the advent of, you see, this telegraph, then telecommunications, and radio, TV, and transport, uh, their representation has been much more assertive. And with this advent of these new technologies and transport facilities, representative of these communities can meet, they can discuss, they can exchange dialogue, and they can also uh, create that fellow feelings and commonality and affiliation towards their ascriptive identity. Um, so that was possible, and accordingly we have also seen there is caste journal, there is caste conferences, there is caste hotels, caste restaurant, caste cooperative. So you could actually see the kind of alliance have been formed across the, like, caste basis or caste line. So the stratification in the society which we usually have, so we have a social stratification, and when we are talking about the caste, caste is also a form of social stratification, right? And caste is different from class even. Are you getting? We are moving from religion to caste because we are dealing with the minority rights. So when we are talking about religious right, so okay, right to practice, propagate religion is fine, and some reasonable restrictions are being provided. And we have entertained some questions and some issues in terms of religious practices and the communalism, which is also associated with this religion. Then we are moving to another like an aspect, that is caste and scheduled caste, which is also like highly deprived, considered to be deprived. But now the issue is about politicization of the caste, and where this caste group are very much assertive of their rights. So there are violation of rights. There was a time their right to life and liberty has also been violated, and so they are not allowed to live with dignity, and there is always a discrimination and stigma attached to the people belonging to one particular community. But you see, gradually they have come out of their uh, uh, stigma, and it is possible because of the representation which is provided by British government. Certain welfare provisions have been created by British government during the colonial India, during their colonial rule, um, for the backward class and backward caste. And British have also provided, you see, some right to local governing units, and in that way, and, uh, and they have emphasized okay. Am I audible now? Am I audible now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. So you see that representation, caste representation, that assertiveness actually came from the policies of Britishers, and gradually, as we have already seen, with the advent of this, transport facilities, transport systems, then communication technology, one caste group has got these avenues to become much more assertive, taking to their rights, taking to what they enjoy. And what we have seen that now that has led to a kind of shift, that has led to a kind of change in the whole stratification system in the society, because uh, you see the rise of non-Brahmin movement doesn't necessarily lead to end of the stigma in the society, end of discrimination. But they're being assertive of their right. Caste is being assertive of their rights, so they are aware of their human rights, and to certain extent, the whole caste based practices and caste-based identities have been also politicized, and government is trying to create a vote bank on the basis of caste, the way, and not government, it's basically political parties. There are also political parties trying to create a vote bank on the basis of caste, the way they are creating vote bank on the basis of religion. So you see that there are mobilization, caste-based mobilization even in the society. And these mobilizations may be horizontal mobilization, vertical mobilization, or you see directional mobilization. Horizontal mobilization is basically gets reflected in all the caste association. You see, there are association like Lorkic Sena, you might have heard. This is a representative unit of, you see, Yadavas. Then you see Bhumihars for these Kurmis, Bhumihar Sena for Kurmis. Then Brahma Sira for, you see, not Bhumihar, that Bhumi Sena is for Kurmis, and Bhumihar, for Bhumihar there is Brahma Sena. And there is also Ganga Sena for caste, and the Vishwana for Brahmins. And there are also castes like Sunlight Sena or Pathans, and there is another more I have found somewhere. Okay, so you actually get to see this kind of various association and caste-based formation which are existed in the society, through which caste has a scheduled caste, or even different like stratified group, different group in the society have been very, very assertive of their right. So here we are not simply talking about SC also. So when we are talking about this Horizon Association, you were talking about this. You can can take into account the uh, various vertical association in the horizon, not vertical, various association in the society, caste-based voluntary association in the society. Then you say when there is a vertical mobilization, uh, which can be reflected in marshalling of, you see, direct and indirect support from the traditional notable readers, and which is usually based on rank, based on occupation. So that vertical mobilization, caste-based mobilization, support mobilization is usually limited and restricted to, like, uh, top rank class. And then we have directionality mobilization. This is called directional mobilization when a political party also marshalling the support from different caste group, and that is entirely based on their marshalling of support is based on difference in ascriptive identity. So that is a different chapter altogether. So you could actually see how political parties have focused on one particular caste group in order to mobilize their vote, and it is easier for a political party also to, uh, to to even convince the leader of caste panchayat to vote on caste line, and that's why you see these associations are politically motivated and they are politically driven association. So when you are talking about the caste-based movement, that is in a way has eroded to a certain extent, eroded the discrimination, and I may say that the stigma, but still it is lies in the heart of the people. So it cannot even, like, at one sweep you can, like, erode. But it has also questioned the democratization of politics, because caste has a role in the politics and democratic politics, and even in democracy also caste has a different kind of role altogether. So this is one thing, and we uh, then uh, we can look at some kind of atrocities which are made by Meton Dalit. So this will come under human rights violation. But today I will not discuss that, and I'd like to take questions from your end. And if you will not have any question, I will finish the lecture. Okay. Do you have any question? Okay. Are you there?
Ma'am,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
have one question. It's
Yeah.
regarding the state legislative laws in protecting the discrimination against women in rural parts, like such as like witch hunting and stuff. So why isn't there an universal law, like in the constitution, or is there a universal law in the constitution protecting women in in that circumstances? Why is it only, why does it have to come down to state legislation?
Yeah, right. So you have actually pointed out a very relevant aspect of the whole issues. So you see, as I have already told you, that all these practices, when we are talking about these prejudices and religious practices, these are actually universal, and it also get to find variation across the, communities and societies. In every society, in every community, you get to find some kind of like practices, superstitious practices and religious based practices. Although I advise you not to mix superstition with religion. Uh, uh, and hence there is a need to like prevent this kind of practices which will lead to take the life of one person, lead to take the life of like women, children, or especially the minorities of the community. uh, and here, as I have already told you, that state legislation has been, various state has passed legislation, passed bill, taking to the problem and superstitious activities and extreme sense of superstitious practices in the societies. And why this law is not like universalized in the sense across the breadth and length of the country and make it as a fundamental rights. I'll take you that the structure of the Constitution, although it is there right after the independence and when it came into force in 1950s. So our fundamental rights are also enshrined in part 3, and there are certain amendments have been made in various point of time, but that amendments has been related to uh, you see the right of Indian in our state, uh, uh, like in order to prevent or prohibit certain practices and some superstitious related activities. So, and superstition or superstitious practices are very particular to one community. Suppose witch hunting is very prevalent here in Assam in different communities. Not in all the communities it is prevalent. I'm talking about this ethnic community here. So when we're talking about the European sentiment of based on ethnicity, there are also different communities apart from this religious communities. So in certain communities, certain ethnic communities, hunting is much more prevalent. And state can better defend it, and if they make the law, and it is not about simply prohibiting, also it is about giving protection to uh, those section of women whose rights have been violated. Okay, and in terms of making a law or creating an amendment in the constitution, it will definitely take time. So certain practices are available, but you see that one law is already there, that drug and medicine privileges and that prevention of that act. That is there. But apart from that, most of the states have adopted their own legislation considering the specificity of act in their society. So form of crime is different, the form of practices are different. As I have told you, as superstitions or superstitious activities are not limited to one communities, these are get to find reflected or get to practice in each and every communities to certain extent, but there is specificity of those activities. So the way we carry out certain practices may not be similar to another community carry out similar practices, and hence state legislation uh, is supposed to provide that protection to one segment of the society, supposed to even prevent the the existing discrimination in the society. And special court has been established in order to investigate the crime related to witch hunting, as I have already told you. And there is a international law prevention of discrimination against women. So it comes under that international instrument when we're talking about like you know uh, this kind of discriminatory practices. But on the basis of superstition, there is no such universal law because it is also related to rites, customs, rituals of one particular society. So it cannot be universalized. Suppose we have a uniform civil code. There is a lot of debate regarding uniform civil code, whether it should be executed or not. Because as I have already told you, the one community always try to look at the specific and is a minority. They'll always try to uh, focus or advocate for their special right instead of general right, and that has lead to, you say, that entrancement and vulnerability. So it's always better to focus on the general right which are already available. Okay, so you want some special right, you want like constitutional protection, and try to alienate from the bigger commonality. So that is not usually desirable, and hence state legislation is there and to deal with these very practices. So hopefully, if there is a protest and revolt and across India, there might be a bill passed by legislature also. Now, state assembly has passed that law, but there might be a point when legislation has already passed it. This kind of practices, but these are very limited to one community. So, and nature is also very different. So it is difficult to pass a central legislation, hence, to curb this kind of practices. So perhaps that is the reason. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, it's 12 o'clock now. I will end today. See you, and you work on
Ma'am,
the
I
assignment.
have another question, but then I'll ask you in the next class, right? I'll save
No,
it
no,
for the
you
next
can ask.
class.
No, no, you can ask today. If it is related to today's lecture, you can ask today.
Yeah, it is. So basically, I have certain certain instances are there that I would like to point out, such as in certain laws, religious laws, there are certain practices that happens, like circumcision. Circumcision is a part of the of even the Hindu culture and the Muslim ideologies. They
Okay, yeah.
circumcise, right? So
Mhm.
in these particular scenarios where body certain body modifications and other stuff are included, and the child can consent to it. So in that case, how can the state intervene? Okay, the state intervene without actually taking away the religious rights or the constitutional rights over here that are already prevalent.
No, no, you see, consent is important. Consent of one particular community is definitely important. But if it is the case whether of uniform civil code or not, and you see that most of the religion, then the Muslim community is supposed to give more steps to their personal law. Okay, so it is their right accordingly. It is also it is also their right to practice their religion and
Ma'am,
to
ma'am,
get
ma'am, you're not at all
yeah,
audible. Your voice is breaking a lot.
it's what is okay.